episode, I think we're going to just quickly touch on the thing that everyone is talking about. And I don't mean the World Cup. I mean the other World Cup.
Greatest films of all time.
And we're joined by James King, actually. Hello, James.
Hello.
So, obviously, this has been 10 years in the making since 2012's poll. So this is a big moment in the Cinephiles calendar. What are our thoughts?
Well, I recall in 2012 it was seen as a huge upset that Citizen Kane had been dethroned by Vertigo. It's quite hard to imagine thinking that was in any way revolutionary,
revolutionary or relevant,
and also trying to find what the kind of cultural or social shift was that made people more interested in a man who falls in love with and kills the same woman twice, rather than a film about rather than a film about a media mogul.
I think it was really that, for so many decades, Citizen Kane had been held up as the greatest film of all time. It was almost like an accepted truth. It's the greatest film of all time. That was sort of the thing that
it will always be. Yeah,
it was the thing you heard as the reason to watch Citizen Kane.
But now I think the number one will be just a different film every time.
It will be, because it's kind of a la mode. I think it was inevitable that a film like Jeanne Dielman would have its day at the top, and I feel like there's a self-fulfilling it felt like that was inevitable before the poll came out. When people were making their predictions, there was a lot of suggestion that Akerman would be up there, and it would reflect the kind of broadened voting pool of 2022, which is, it's doubled the voting pool, I believe, so from 800 to 1600.
But in 1952, there were 63 people voting for this.
Yeah, it is really broad.
So I don't think this was the first time the electorate was dramatically expanded.
No, true. But I think the expansion here was expanding beyond the kind of ivory towers of the institutions.
Yeah, legacy
kind of
institutions, exactly.
Right, and reached out to, Zoomer bloggers and YouTubers and a kind of more diverse cast. Yeah, not podcasters. And also reached out to, maybe this wasn't the case in 2012, but, programmers and editors from streaming services like Mubi. I don't know if they were involved in 2012, because I don't know if Mubi existed in 2012, but I think you've got even quite minor editors from these platforms were
I think including programmers is quite a huge step, because programmers are not necessarily people with critical faculties. Sometimes they are, but it is not, a lot of programmers, or at least curators in the art world is where my area of expertise is greater, are often people who follow trends rather than set them.
The PRification of.
So I'm a bit.
Yeah.
Also, the curatorial skills is you're often looking for connections and resonance rather than sort of casting a steely, objective eye. And as a programmer, you're often used to working with the sort of the materials you've been given at any particular cultural moment in time, rather than reflecting on 150 years of cinema history.
You're looking for like the news hook,
exactly.
But I think this poll now is not a reflection of the state of the art of filmmaking for 150 years. It's a reflection of the critical consensus of the year 2022 and the kind of concerns and themes that, obviously like it's some of it is like a self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, because you get films like Tokyo Story, which I don't think is even the greatest Ozu film, but it's kind of held to be his masterpiece. And I think people think, I should vote Ozu. Maybe they haven't watched much more deeply. I think a lot of people probably don't watch that much more deeply than
I don't
Tokyo
watch
Story.
Ozu more deeply because Tokyo Story is fucking boring.
It's Tokyo Story.
Why would I watch more films? But I've seen Late Spring, but
Equinox Flower, I think, is a far superior film. But he, that's the thing. I think people tend to choose.
Renoir's Grande Illusion is much better than Règle du Jour, which for some reason seems to be the canon pick.
Yeah, it's just odd. I think people see that and I think there's like when we were chatting on our group chat, I think looking at the insight from some of the voters, they were trying to. He was someone from Mubi who was like, they were embarrassed that 2 of their films were actually in the top 10 because they were trying to be as obtuse and B-side and wildcard as possible. So in a way, I think a lot of voters, you've probably got, when the full vote count comes out in January, I think you'll probably see lots of 1s, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 votes for films that wouldn't make it because they don't have critical mass to get into the top. So the actual votes
this can change so quickly.
Jeanne Dielman had 191 votes from 1,600 voters.
Wait, is that real? 190 votes?
190 was sufficient to get to place 1. So it's a very. I don't think that's statistically significant. So it's not like it was on 1,000 lists. It was on
but
191
that's still like 10%. That's 1 in 10 people put it on their list.
Yeah.
That is pretty considerable. I mean, I think we were also talking about this in that, certain directors where there's no confirmed front runner, someone like Romer, who has
no Romer on the list.
Green Ray is probably
arguably like over a dozen truly great films of fairly
almost every
comparable
film he made
quality,
was extraordinary,
but they don't have that single one where they're like, this is Romer's
because there isn't a masterpiece. I don't think there is a masterpiece for Romer.
When it comes to someone like Akerman, who, I mean, it's also worth noting that up until 10 years ago, a lot of her film wasn't even easily accessible.
Very true.
That's why that 18-month retrospective started at the ICA, was because it was the first time, it was through the efforts of Joanna Hogg and Adam Roberts, that they were actually working with the Belgian embassy to make a lot of these films available. A lot of those films we had to do live subtitling for because no English subtitles existed. So there's been this kind of like thing where a lot of her films are only relatively recently available. But it's also that Jeanne Dielman's the one that people just talk about. I mean, not necessarily even watch. A lot of people, I think it's fair to say that plenty of people voted for this film that may not have even watched it in its entirety.
It was considered to resonate with the culture now, where it's a big deal that there's a woman at the top of the list, and it's a film that explicitly explores women's view of the world, whatever, blah blah blah.
Yeah, and it's a very good film. Like there's nothing embarrassing about it being at the top of the list.
It's a worthy number one. I mean, you've also got some inclusions on the list. I mean, there's shit inclusions where I don't even talk about, like Get Out and those things. But
we don't need to talk about it.
We don't need to moan about that.
But I think it's good that you've got Virus Ethical on the list. Maya Deren punches really highly on the list. So I mean, Virus Ethical actually was very low on the list, which surprised me because he's actually on the Art Power list that came out very recently.
Art Reviews Power 100,
Power 100, Power Bottom 100. So he's got this kind of cultural cachet which spreads beyond the world of film. I was kind of surprised that he wouldn't be there because Virus Ethical is like the darling of art house cinema. Everyone loves him. Everyone likes. When we talk to people in our group and we get people's top 10s or 20s, it's inevitable that
people
Virus
we
Ethical
know
is going to be
worship
on there.
him.
Yeah.
But that's our bubble. Everyone has their own.
It's true.
I think with Jeanne Dielman,
Stop Asian hate.
Yeah. I think with Jeanne Dielman, I am really looking forward to. I mean, it will show at the BFI a bunch. In the early quarter of the first quarter of next year, and I am really excited to see it again because I last watched it on TV when I was a teenager, just with my mum. It wasn't showing on Channel 4 or anything. It was just I downloaded a torrent before it was available on streaming platforms, because I knew it was an essential canonical thing. I watched it. I did find it very engaging. I did find a certain transcendent beauty in it, and wonder, and I loved talking about it afterwards to people. But I have a much fonder spot for Je tu il elle and News from Home and other sort of the other one with the long title with Brussels in it, the 60-minute long one about the young girl in Brussels. Anyway, and her hilarious film that we reviewed with William Hurt and Juliette Binoche.
Couch in New York.
I don't love that one. But extraordinary director, obviously. And her placing at number one is a great move for structural cinema, for people who want to do something different with film. I'm really glad that, normies are being outraged by this. I think it's kind of... I think Jeanne Dielman, I mean, without wishing to spoil the plot, there's something quite didactic about the plot line of Jeanne Dielman, and the way people talk about the slowness as being kind of a feminist statement about the feminine labor. This is, I think some people are voting for it for reasons that I find a bit irritating, and therefore there's a strange ambiguity. Not that I disrespect that feminist critique. I just don't think I'm not interested by cinema for foregrounding a political point. I know that Akerman's work goes much deeper than that, and the experience of watching it delivers so much more. And so, in that sense, I'm overall very pleased to see it at number one. But obviously, there's a discourse around it being at number one and going so quickly to the top. But I'm great. I'm hyped for a Blu-ray box set of Chantal Akerman.
I think it'll be
inevitable
in the
next 2 years.
But I think there's lots of things about the list where I think a lot of it was playing it safe. It was good to see Histoire du Cinéma for Godard. I mean, Godard's death probably precipitated a lot of people to stack Godard into their list. But I mean, you saw it was like the usual suspects with Godard, apart from that, because it was like Bout de Soufflé, Père Le Fou. It wasn't like Hail Mary or
missed out the 80s. Everyone misses out the fucking 80s.
It's the best period.
I think there was a few interesting additions. Something like Wonder by Barbara Loden was an interesting new addition, and I think it highlights the impact sometimes of writing about film on the critical mass, because obviously there was that book that really captured the zeitgeist, Sweet for Barbara Loden, that came out a few years ago. It's a great book, but I would, it came out at a time when the film was actually very hard to see. It's still hard to access in the UK,
but in the US it's on the Criterion, right?
Yeah. But the fact that I think maybe a lot of people were introduced to the film through that book is interesting.
I wonder if this was this a list made by torrenting? Because the one thing, was this a film?
I think it was a list made by the Criterion Collection and by Martin Scorsese's World Cinema Foundation.
Well, no, because actually Limité wasn't there, actually, wasn't it? Was Pizotto's Limité in the top 100?
I just don't love that.
I wonder if that was a factor.
I just don't love that film.
It's a great film, come on.
Well, I mean, there's that question, like Jeanne Dielman's not been available to stream in the UK until Thursday this week. So how are these people watching this film?
Presumably torrenting.
Yeah.
I mean, but a lot of people are quite self-righteous about torrenting, there's a lot of people saying, how could you possibly be conscious?
Around
How could you possibly be conscious stealing money from the mouths of film programmers and distributors? And it's like very easily, actually.
Also like if you live in fucking Bolton, there's not going to be a screening of Jeanne Dielman at your local.
No, let's level up.
Cinema. We need to level up.
There might be now, and that's a great thing.
Exactly.
Actually,